Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talent Smart EQ's LinkedIn Live series, Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We would love to know where everybody is joining us from, so feel free to go into the comments section over there and let us know where you're at, who you're with if you'd like. I am so excited about today's conversation. It is about emotional intelligence and the future of policing. So, whether you are in law enforcement or not, we think that it's really important to really understand how emotional intelligence in the law enforcement community impacts everybody. For those of you who don't know, Talent Smart is the world's premier provider of emotional intelligence assessments and programming throughout the world. We are located in San Diego, California, where many of us happen to be remotely working around the country, such as myself. I'm actually over on the East Coast. I am David Brzezowski, the Director of Training with Talent Smart, and I will be your moderator today for this exciting conversation. Please, by all means, add into the comment section any questions that you have along the way. And our goal today is to be able to get to as many of them as possible. I see a bunch of people from California joining us. Thank you, guys. London, Nicole, welcome. Thank you. Illinois, so excellent. Keep on coming in. Let us know where you're coming from. But I'm so excited to introduce you my two guests for this conversation. First off, Dr. Greg Campbell. He is the Vice President of Law Enforcement and Government for Talent Smart. He comes to us with more than 25 years of federal law enforcement experience and expertise in both emotional intelligence and DE&I. Greg is also coming from us from not San Diego, but he's coming from Dallas, Texas. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hey there, David. Good to be on. And I want to give a quick shout out to Casey. I see you, Casey, in Fort Worth. I'm right next to you in Dallas. So good to have you on.
Excellent. Thank you. And also joining us is Errol Randall. He is a retired 25-year veteran of the Charleston, West Virginia Police Department. And currently, he is the Community Outreach Specialist in conjunction with the Department of Homeland Security and the Division of Education for the state of West Virginia. And I understand, Errol, you are still in Charleston, correct?
I am still in Charleston. I'm in the great state of West Virginia.
Excellent. Got to put the great state. I hear you. I hear you. Excellent. Excellent. Well, listen, I wanted to make sure that we clarified to everybody, for those of you who maybe don't even know the term of emotional intelligence, what that is. So I'm going to give you a very high level definition and how we define emotional intelligence. That it is your ability to recognize and understand your emotions. And then it's your ability to take that awareness and then manage your emotions by using 4 skills within EQ. And when we say EQ or emotional intelligence, we're using that interchangeably. But the 4 skills that you will probably hear Errol or Greg or I talk about throughout today is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. So that's a really high level view. Keep on letting us know where you're coming from in there. Thank you, everybody. Greg, I wanted to start off with you, though, first and foremost, and ask you to just simply share with all of us, when you first saw that emotional intelligence skills were a good, if you will, fit to connect with law enforcement.
Yeah, David, thank you for the question. And I feel really important because I worked 27 years in law enforcement, and I was doing a career that I felt I was born to do, work and serve the American public. So from the very beginning of my law enforcement career, I knew that I wanted to protect and serve the communities. What that means from an EQ standpoint, David, I went into law enforcement. The first time I hit the streets, here's what me and my partner said, and we made a pact at a very young age. We were in our 20s. And we made a pact with one another. He was a federal agent for the Secret Service. I was a federal agent for the United States Postal Inspection Service. And we said that no matter what situation we encounter, we're going to respond and not react. Now, I didn't know it at the time, but that's definitely self-awareness and a little self-management and a little social awareness as we think about emotional intelligence. I'd also like to give you one more example, David. Just this past week, I had the privilege and opportunity to be at the NOBLE conference, National Organization of Black law enforcement executives in Orlando, Florida. And there were police officers and executives from all over the United States and internationally. And at our booth, David, a chief of police came up to us and he said, emotional intelligence matters. And myself and my colleague, Demias Purdue, said, tell us why. He said, while I'm at this conference this morning, I just got a call that several of my officers have been in an officer-involved shooting. And he said, after the incident, they briefed me on the incident. He said, those 4 officers, I called each one of them's home personally. And he said they were blown away that the chief, I, had called them individually. And then we led him down the conversation of that's emotional intelligence. Yeah. So just wanted to provide that example.
No, that's really powerful. I mean, showing that kind of social awareness on his part. It's great that you were able to kind of point that out and have that just simple conversation about that's really what EQ is about. Yeah, I love that. Errol, so I know that you are a big proponent of emotional intelligence and how it has strengthened skills within the police and law enforcement. You've been a proponent of this for quite a while. So before we get into some of the specifics of how you're utilizing EQ, how did you first start connecting your world with emotional intelligence?
Wow, I'll tell you what, for me, it went back to when I was a little kid. I come from a family of law enforcement officers. My dad is a retired police chief from where I'm from in Indiana. I have a brother that's retired, a brother-in-law that was executive law enforcement, and we're in our 3rd generation within my family. And so I always wondered, what was that knack that my dad had that people responded to him in such a positive way? How was he able to carry himself? And really, this is what it was. It was emotional intelligence. And so, I was kind of really introduced to it on another level through some executive leadership training that I was able to participate in while I was with the Charleston Police Department. And the term emotional intelligence came up, and that definition that you gave earlier was read. And man, that's when I had my light bulb moment. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the piece of the missing puzzle that we need right now to help us to move forward. And not just to move forward, but to move forward and to be able to serve in an effective manner. And so began to do some research on it and to say, and eventually evolved. And we began to think about it in terms of law enforcement, because we heard that it was involved in corporate America, but how could that look in law enforcement?
Yeah.
And so we began to do some research and we put some things together, and we're just amazed how law enforcement is receiving it. I'm holding it dear to them personally and professionally, and moving forward and serving in such a great way and being effective with it.
Yeah, I love that story, especially not knowing it was really EQ you were talking about, and then to kind of really discover and be able to kind of put some bullet points to that point. Greg, I was going to ask you, like what Errol was just describing. You've had a chance now that you've been with Talent Smart to connect with many law enforcement communities throughout the U.S. since you've been with us. So how has a bit of what Errol just shared with us, how is making those connections aligning for you, like with what you're hearing and seeing in some of the discussions that you've been having across the country?
Yes. So thank you, David. Law enforcement, because we're serving in the public's eye, you're under the microscope on television, on social media, and other places. And so any actions that law enforcement take, others get to look in from the outside and critique it. So you'll hear the term that law enforcement needs more training and training and training. So when I think about emotional intelligence and what we're doing at Talent Smart with police departments is helping them understand that emotional intelligence can be used in training, whether that's firearms training, defensive tactics, defensive driving. It can be used in leadership training with police departments, in mentoring with police departments. Police departments are focusing on officer well-being training, resilience training, peer-to-peer training within police departments. And then finally, my favorite is community policing. What I see in the research is that many individual citizens' perceptions of police departments are not based upon individual or direct contact with police, but it's based upon what they're seeing on television or in the media or on social media. And so my invitation, my exhortation to police chiefs and police leaders are to connect with your community, control the narrative, build relationships with the communities that you serve, and then you will build trust. So I believe that emotional intelligence is the answer for policing.
Yeah, great. I
Totally.
love that. Yeah. So, Errol, not to put you on the spot here, but have you seen any wins thus far with your teams using emotional intelligence skills? And if so, would you mind sharing one or two of them with us? Because I'd be really curious to hear what you're seeing and what you're hearing and feeling.
Yes, actually, I am seeing some major wins. It's just there's something to it when you have an officer that while he's receiving this training, he gets that light bulb moment, and that officer says to you, "Man, this is going to help me so much in my personal life, even not just professionally, but even with my personal life." And they're connected. We have to recognize that what happens at home, the stresses that we have at home, it can carry over. Now we don't want that to happen, but if they're recognized that they have the ability to control their emotions, there are very few things that we can control.
Yeah.
But if we work at it and we're diligent at it and we're deliberate at it, we can begin to control our emotions, and the way that we react to certain things that happen around us can be better controlled. But we're seeing such great things happening here in even in Charleston, West Virginia. The entire police department was trained. Now that becomes part of the culture. And they're feeding off each other. They're holding each other accountable to the things that they've learned. And what they've also recognized is it's not rocket science. It's about being deliberate. So if I can work on these different ways to help me be more self-aware, man, oh man, how that's going to translate in being able to be better at self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And so the small things, and they begin to see wins, and it snowballs. And again, it changes the culture in a positive way. So I'm seeing, I saw, for instance, I was cutting grass one day, and an officer who had participated in the class drove up, and he stopped. He said, "Man, I love the class." He said, "Matter of fact, I'm just looking at things so much different now because because I've never had anyone give me a tool that would help me to look at myself in such a manner." And he said, because of that, I feel like I'm just a changed person now because I think about it all the time. And so I talk to people differently, and I look at things differently, and they process things differently. So what he goes on to say is, there's a person I would like to help. He's been involved in the in the criminal justice system for a while, but I want to do something different with him. Then, make a long story short, he helped this gentleman get a job, and those are the wins that we're trying to achieve. Those are relationships that we're trying to build, and so I could go on and on about the successes and how the police department has used this to help change the culture, and it translates in, again, better serving others.
Yeah. I think that's a great call out. And there's a great question that came in our chat from Maggie asking specifically to you, Errol. So have you seen, or how have you seen officers holding even each other accountable when it comes to this too? Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yes. I can give you another example. I don't know what this is, but each time I've seen these examples, I've been out cutting grass. But the second example that I had was there were some kids in my neighborhood, and unfortunately, their game that they were playing was they were having very dangerous. They were having shootouts with each other with BB guns. And we've had things happen in the national media that of incidents that have occurred that involved with police and BB guns that look real. What I appreciated about this encounter was they were so aware of their approach and what their body language was saying. And as a result, they were able to de-escalate the situation by their approach, the way that they approached the young men, that the way that they talked to them, their tone, their body language. And the first thing that these officers did when they approached these young men is they said, "We would like to talk to you." And when they approached, they fist bumped each other. And so, you're taking a situation that could be seen as a deadly force incident, depending on how it's looked at, but their brain has slowed down. They're able to really recognize the significance of what this could lead to. They were conscious about their approach, their body language. They also understood the body language of the person they were encountering, and ultimately they had a good outcome.
Yeah,
man, that's what we want to achieve with this. That's what emotional intelligence brings to the table.
Well, what a great example of just some real solid self-management that maybe was missing before you really have this conversation when it comes to emotional intelligence with some of that. Another great question came in from Brennan. What are some positive reactions from the communities of officers who've been trained? And I'm going to let either of you go ahead and speak to that, but anything that you can share from positive reactions that you've heard. Thank you, Brennan, for that question.
David, I'll take that one. And Brennan, thank you for that question. I just got a direct message on LinkedIn this morning from a police officer who I met on LinkedIn, who sent me a message, and he said, "Greg, EQ is the difference maker." He's a police officer in Florida. He says he pulled up on the scene. He was not the first responding officer, and his partner was in a difficult conversation with someone that he had stopped. And he said he used his emotional intelligence skills. He's only been a police officer for a short time, less than 8 months. He learned emotional intelligence while he was in the military. And he transferred those skills onto his new profession of serving as a police officer. And he just said he sort of uses his relationship management skills with that officer, eased into the conversation, and de-escalated that conversation. Yeah. And he says what he's been saying to his colleagues is, if we could just pause and take 20 seconds to think about our own emotions, what's possibly triggering us or not triggering us, to understand what that person who you're stopping is going through, it makes a difference as you protect and serve your community. I like to end it like this. Here's what I say. Results move at the speed of relationships. Relationships move at the speed of trust. So if officers want to have better relationships with their community, build trust, and emotional intelligence helps you do that. So I think it's a difference maker there. And that builds community relationships, Brennan. If you build trust with your community, then you'll have different relationships with the officers who serve and protect you.
Yeah, and I think you just brought up a great point that he learned this skill elsewhere, that really emotional intelligence is a true life skill that wherever you're going, it's going to work for you in that instance. So thank you for that. And Greg, I just want to stick with you really quick, because I know you've been working on exciting program, a piece of the puzzle that's been missing for us here at Talent Smart. So anything that you want to share at a high level of what you're looking at right now that we're going to be offering to the police and law enforcement community, just a high level look at what is it that you've been working on. And I'm going to get to some more questions that we have in here too.
Sure. And what I've been saying to police departments, David, is I've tried to broaden their perspective of how they can actually use emotional intelligence within their departments. For example, training, leadership, mentoring, community policing are all areas in which police leaders and departments can use emotional intelligence training within their organizations. Yeah. And our content, the difference maker, is there's an assessment that goes with it. Once you understand where you are, then you can, as Errol said, you can learn it. It's not rocket science. You can build on those skills. And then the best part about our content is that we provide 66 strategies to help those officers actually apply it from where they are on a day-to-day basis. I'll sum it up this way. I say it to police departments and officers this way. We get intel on cars before we stop them. We get intel, Errol, on individuals before we encounter them. We even get intel on homes before we do search warrants and we go in them. Why not have emotional intel on ourselves? How self-aware are we? Do we manage ourselves well? Do we have good social awareness? And do we have good relationship management? I also say this: we hire oftentimes in police for IQ. what you put on a resume, we tend to fire for EQ, not having one of those 4 core skills. So this is a great way for police departments to see an impact, potentially in their use of force incidents, in their misconduct incidents, and with their relationships with their community. Our job is to protect and serve, and emotional intelligence is the answer.
Yeah, great.
And David, may I add to that, please?
Please, Daryl, yes.
Great summation by Dr. Campbell on that, because it's so powerful what that means to law enforcement. I'm going to step back to what he said about training. There are classes that we are recommending that law enforcement departments take that help not only increase your EQ, but also help you become a well-rounded officer. So it's very important for us to understand the importance of being able to recognize nonverbal communication.
Yeah.
So one of the classes that we recommend is kinesics. Kinesics is a study of body language. You know, there's a Talent Smart. It has some research that was, I believe, done by UCLA on how messages are received. 55% of it is through nonverbal cues. 37% is by how it's said, and then 5%, I believe, is, or 7%, whatever's left is what is actually said. So we want these officers to ultimately become culturally competent. So we're recommending kinesics. We're recommending diversity classes on race relations, the history of policing, so we can recognize where we fall into the narrative and how we've gotten to where we are right now. And these things tie together. But the key to this, going back to what Dr. Campbell said, is that the emotional intelligence piece is the base to build all of this upon. So we're excited about what we're looking at moving forward. Again, we're looking at this in different ways of how training can be more effective, and with emotional intelligence, this is the big way.
Great. Thank you for chiming in on that. I appreciate it. I do want to make sure I let Nicole know, who's put in the comment, that Madison's going to go ahead and grab your information so that Dr. Campbell can get a hold of you after to connect with you. Thank you for that. I did want to ask, since we're on the topic of training here, Carl asked a question in our comments, says, how do I get my officers to practice EQ? It seems like in stressful encounters, survival instincts overrides EQ. Is it a different part of the brain? Can it be trained to help mitigate stress?
Yes. So Carl, thank you, first of all, for asking that question. When I think about emotional intelligence, yes, first of all, we can train your officers, and reach out to me after this session and we could talk about it in more detail. When I think about emotional intelligence, here's why I start with police departments. It's really about officer well-being, which really includes officers' good mental health, high life satisfaction, a sense of meaning and purpose, serving in policing. And then here's the one you just mentioned, Carl, it's the ability to manage stress. Emotional intelligence skills, when they're learned, those 4 core skills, and practicing those strategies will help you manage stress. Let me give you one quick example, Carl, how EQ skills will not be overwritten when you're in a high stress situations and your instincts kick in. I was responding to interview a witness of a kidnapping robbery situation, and I called the witness ahead of time, Carl, and I said, we're 10 minutes out, we'll be there to interview you. And Carl, my social awareness kicked in. Something wasn't right on that call. And it was just what I heard in the voice. It was something about my upbringing growing up in the inner city of Los Angeles that I knew something wasn't right. Carl, when me and my partner went into that house, it was a studio apartment. Immediately when we went in, the person grabbed a knife off of the racks, those racks that just have 5 or 6 knives in the rack, grabbed the knife and came at me the moment we walked in the door. I was able to draw my weapon. I drew my weapon and was able to give 3 quick commands: drop the weapon, drop the weapon. And because I saw it, Carl, before I got there, I'm going to call that social awareness. And then I was able to manage myself. Here's what I say EQ helped me do that day. This was that game changer for me when it comes to emotional intelligence in my career and looking at it from a research standpoint in law enforcement. I said, I just saved that woman's life. Not because of my training. It was because of my training, but also more importantly, because of my emotional awareness, my emotional intelligence awareness before I went into that house. So I don't think one replaces the other. Carl, what I would say is that officers need more tools on their tool belt in addition to just a firearm, a taser, and a baton. And emotional intelligence becomes another tool on the tool belt or in the tool kit that will help with your encounters with the community. That's the way I would like to look at it. And there's much more stuff to that, Carl, that I'd love to talk to you offline about it as well.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. Thanks. I think one for you, Errol, here. Brennan had a follow-up question I think is great. Since, Errol, you've been working with this for a little while. So what do you think has held law enforcement back from incorporating EQ training in the past? And I mean, and certainly, Greg, chime in a little bit as well. But I mean, because Greg has not been with us as long as we probably could have used him in the past to incorporate EQ. But Errol, what do you think?
One, EQ in terms of law enforcement is still relatively new.
Yeah.
And so that that's what we're here doing now, is trying to get the word out as far as this is a new tool that has the research behind it that's going to allow us to again serve well, both professionally and personally. And so you know, we're trying to make sure that our officers get this as early as possible. Matter of fact, it starts at our academy. Each person that goes through our West Virginia State Police Academy, which includes state police, DNR, municipal and county, all those officers go through the academy. From day one, they get this assessment, they get this appraisal. So they're able to recognize that. And just like you said earlier, Dr. Campbell, they see this as a tool that's going to help them. And they're like, wow, this is what's going to give me the confidence to move forward with my career and actually help them have a meaningful, honorable career. So we're just excited about that. But yeah, it's new, and the research behind it is still relatively new, but in terms of being tied to law enforcement. But we're excited because we are making sure we're tying those loose ends together to get the word out. And it's just too important for us not to have in terms of our culture within the police department.
Thanks.
David,
Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, David, thank you for letting me add to that. And Errol is absolutely correct. Law enforcement is an organization that's been around for a long time. And many of our training techniques and strategies have been set in stone for many years. So it is new in the form of policing. However, Talent Smart has been around for over 20 years, and this is a research-based content that can help police departments. And so what I would say, another reason, Brennan, police departments haven't incorporated EQ into their strategies, it's one of them is funding. Let's just be real. It's funding. Where do they spend their budgets? How do they spread their funding? So funding is important to help police departments have access to this training. And the other one is just a lack of knowledge and understanding of what EQ is and how it can impact their police departments from a return on investment standpoint, or ROI. So here's the difference maker with Talent Smart. We have a team. Every police department that I talk to, I not only talk about the benefits of bringing EQ to your department and how it may impact your officers from a sense of well-being and many other areas, but I also talk about the ROI. We can partner with law enforcement agencies with our assessments and with our other tools to help you see the actual return on investment. And then you can go to city council, you can go to the mayor, you can go to the president or Congress if you're a federal agency. And then you can say, here's the benefit from a morale, engagement, use of force, misconduct. We're going to be able to help you be able to show the return on investment in those areas.
Yeah,
hey, also on that, you're able to take what Talent Smart provides you in terms of an overall view of your entire department. And when it comes to training, because of what you see with your statistics and your research with your department, hone in on specific types of training that are needed. How important is that? Instead of just making sure you check the box as far as making sure officers get law enforcement credits for the yearly for their yearly credits, you're really honing in on the types of training that is actually needed for your specific department.
Thank you for that, Errol. Let me stick with you because besides the people that have been joining us that are part of law enforcement in the community, so there's other people that I know that are either listening in now or will be looking at the recording later on. So what would you say to just the general listener as to why we all should care about, especially thinking about how you've been working in West Virginia? Why does it matter?
Well, we live in a diverse world, where there's a lot of different, ethnicities, there's a lot of different ways of thinking, different backgrounds. We have to have a mechanism that's going to help us understand and appreciate the different perspectives that are out there. Being well versed and mastering your emotional intelligence is a big tool that's going to help you get towards achieving that. So it doesn't matter if it's not just law enforcement. I don't care who you are or what your profession is. If you engage in incorporating emotional intelligence into your everyday life, what you do on an everyday basis is going to be more fruitful, more meaningful, and it's just going to make everything better.
David, you mind if I jump in? And
I was
Errol,
just going to ask you, what is your
Errol,
perspective?
I could sit and talk to you for hours, but I was watching the comment box, and I saw Ellie had put in the comment box, have officers you have worked with been able to incorporate these trainees into their home life as well as their work? And I'm just going to tell you, that's overwhelmingly what we see the response is. I say it this way, Ellie, hurt people hurt people. Yes. And so if we can inspire officers to have a sense of well-being and wholeness, then they will protect and serve their communities at a whole different level. Ellie, I get text messages every single day from police officers who text me about how it's impacting their families' lives. I got a call last week, Ellie, from a police officer who asked me to join him and his wife on a call. Would my wife be willing to join them? Ellie, I almost lost my marriage as a result of not understanding emotional intelligence or how my brain worked. I was working undercover and I was good at it. Matter of fact, I was great at it. What I didn't understand is that I was going through adrenaline rushes on a daily basis, working undercover, and I was coming home and then not talking to my wife, not having conversations with my children. And here's what the difference maker was. We went to counseling, and the counselor asked me, "What do you do?" And I explained my undercover work. She says, "You're going through an adrenaline rush on a daily basis, and you're coming off that adrenaline rush when you get home. So it's nothing wrong with you. It's you understanding your brain." We talk about how the brain matters in emotional intelligence, how actually you experience things physically often before you do, or emotionally before and physically, like your hands sweating or like your heart starting to race. What are those signs, those physical responses mean? So we help police officers begin to understand that. And now, Ellie, guess what? I've been married over 31 years, 2 adult children. So EQ matters. And that changed my life. It was the lack of information that was destroying my relationship with my wife. It was when I gained the information, such as emotional intelligence and how my brain is actually responding, that it actually brought together and mended my relationship. So we do that in every department that we work with.
Thank you, Greg. That's powerful. Talk about EQ for your everyday life, right? I mean, that's pretty
there
powerful.
It is, David.
So I want to encourage, we still have a few minutes of any other questions for anybody, but I want to throw over to Errol. In West Virginia, what's next? What do you see happening in your world next when it comes to EQ?
Well, we've already started the next. What we've done is we've recognized that our goal is to get every police officer that works within the state of West Virginia trained in EQ. Great. And we've reached out to, or actually Senator Manchin has reached out to us and asked us to apply for Senate appropriations, which we have. And because, again, what Dr. Campbell said earlier is true. Police departments have small training budgets. We do not want money to be an issue. This tool of emotional intelligence is just too important for these officers not to get it, to have a meaningful career. We no longer want to see the horrific things on TV that come on the news, because quite often my thought goes to, there's a lack of emotional intelligence. We want there to be our officers to be highly trained, to be highly effective. So we're reaching out one by one to these police departments, and as you sit there and you talk to the law enforcement executive or the chief of police, when you give them a book and say, I just want you to take the appraisal, read the first 50 pages of the book, and tell me what you think. We did that with the Charleston Police Department chief of police, and the next day he said, I want my entire police department trained because it was that impactful to him.
Yeah.
So again, we wanted to get everybody within the state of West Virginia trained, and in a bigger scale with Dr. Campbell, help him to help everyone throughout the country receive this tool, because it's just too important.
Thank you. Thank you. And I was going to bring that up to Greg to say, how should we have anybody who's interested in getting a hold of us at Talent Smart, specifically you, Greg, to even just have conversations about what this could do in their particular worlds? How can people get a hold of you?
Yes, thank you, David. You can go to www.talentsmart.com, or you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn, or gregory.campbell@talentsmart.com. And our goal is to reach every police department in the country. It really is. And to have an impact on every single police officer in the country, one officer at a time. We often see these incidents on television, in the media, and they're high profile incidents. And you often hear the terms, David, of individuals talking about one bad apple or the bad apple. But at Talent Smart, in my role as vice president of law enforcement and government, I want to focus on the orchard and not the bad apple. If I'm not a farmer, I'm a boy from the inner city, but I've never seen a farmer plant a seed on a Monday and say he had crop failure on a Sunday. So it really is about looking at the orchard, every tree in the department. I call that the culture of the department. Errol mentioned that early on in what they were doing in West Virginia. It wasn't about a bad apple. It was about the culture of the police department. I call that the orchard. And there will be bad apples in any orchard, and you just deal with them. You pick them up, you throw them away, or you put them in a proper receptacle. But the overall orchard itself is healthy, whole, and it provides resources and nourishment to our communities. I'm excited to say, David, in conclusion, that there is a new presidential executive order out, number 14074, where President Biden has actually asked law enforcement to do some things when it comes to public safety, officer well-being, and how officers are oftentimes the first individual that citizens in their community see for respect, dignity, and human rights. So we have an opportunity at Talent Smart to partner with police departments to help them build secure, safe, and healthy communities. And emotional intelligence is the answer.
That is powerful.
David, may I put Dr. Campbell on the spot?
Please do. It's hard to do that with him.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, Dr. Campbell, from day one that I met you, man, I've been so impressed. In terms of emotional intelligence in law enforcement, you've done a lot of research on it. Can you tell us, in terms of your educational background, how that relates?
Sure. So I have personal experience with law enforcement, Errol, growing up in the inner city of Los Angeles, Compton, California, and experiencing many different things as it related to policing. Went on to get my PhD in management with an emphasis in leadership and organizational change. And my research interest is in emotional intelligence and leadership styles of law enforcement executives. And what I've seen is that those leaders that focus on transformational leadership, situational leadership, servant leadership, and have high EQ are the ones who make a difference in their communities and in serving the officers who work for them and their communities. So my research interest is there, Errol, and I'll continue working with our team at Talent Smart to write articles, to do LinkedIn Lives, to do webinars, podcasts, and to go into police departments and train all over this country and internationally. So I'm excited about it.
Thank you, Greg. And
David,
thanks for the question for him.
I just want you what our yes, sir. What our research, relationship with Talent Smart was it was me simply picking up the phone and calling Talent Smart and saying, how can we work together? And I just remember, and I have to plug her name, Taryn McKenzie. I just remember Taryn coming and Amy Wolf coming to West Virginia to help facilitate the early brainstorming of what we're doing now with emotional intelligence and law enforcement. I just remember the day that they said, we have someone that's coming on board that is really going to help move us forward, being Dr. Campbell. And from just in the short period of time he's been there, the strides that have been made, but their approach to law enforcement, making us or helping us to get to the point where we're doing this training, has been simply amazing. Easy to talk to, and just make the phone call, make contact Dr. Campbell, please. You will not be disappointed.
Let me ask the one last question that came in before we wrap things up. And I think, Errol, this is perfect. You came from Michael G. So with the departments that have adopted the program, what accountability measures have been implemented to ensure that it's successful? And some examples he gave are reward systems, punitive, peer-to-peer, et cetera. Anything that you maybe have been able, you can share with us on that point?
Yes, what I can say is just the number of accommodations have gone up already.
Yeah.
The number of officer misconduct complaints have gone down. Matter of fact, in another sense, the use of force incidents have gone down. So each time you have a use of force incident go down, you have a life saved.
Yeah.
That's how critical this is. Matter of fact, just in the first year, I believe use of force incidents went down over 20%. That is amazing. But again, it's because of what Talent Smart brings to the table with the appraisal, for us to be aware. I know for me, when I had the appraisal, I was instantly changed. Because from that point forward, I had this level of awareness that was not going to allow me to move backwards. So that's how that's how this has affected us here in West Virginia.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much. And thank you to both of you. First of all, Madison, thank you for always keeping us looking like we know exactly what we're doing on LinkedIn Live here. I want to thank Errol, first of all, for joining us from West Virginia. Keep up with the amazing work. And I know that we'll still continue to work with you. Greg, as always, thank you for joining and really just being a force for the policing community. And again, if there's an interest to get a hold of us, I'm going to ask Madison if she would just drop in the Talent Smart email and potentially Greg's email into the comment section for any of you who would like to reach out to us directly. Please do so. This has been the culmination of our series for this particular month of the topic of the importance of emotional intelligence in the future of law enforcement and in policing. And so we're going to be back again next month with a brand new topic. August 25th, we'll be right back here on LinkedIn for our next Emotional Intelligence for Your Everyday Life. We'll be exploring the topic of emotional intelligence and psychological safety. With us, we will have our Executive Vice President of Applied Research, Dr. Maggie Sass, along with one of my peers, Josh Rosenthal, both really knowledgeable in the topic of psychological safety. I'll be back as your moderator for that. Keep following us here on LinkedIn or at our website. We would love to hear from you. Until then, keep on talking about emotional intelligence for your everyday life. We'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.